Now, you might imagine, say from the workplace, that if you're doing work, you want to get paid reliably. You want to know, for example, that every 100 widgets you put together, you'll get a certain amount of money. You might imagine that, but it actually turns out not to be true. If you give people feedback that's a little bit unpredictable, you build in an engine of unpredictability, they will be much more engaged. Now, we know this from gambling. One of the things that makes gambling and lotteries so compelling is that you don't know if you're going to win. You have to keep playing over and over again. There's a chance you'll get really positive feedback, but there's a really good chance you'll get no positive feedback at all. And we know that that's really addictive. People love that uncertainty because it makes the victory of a win that much sweeter. And when you do win, you think about that win much more than if the winning is guaranteed. Now, where this really matters is in the social world in particular. So we know, for example, from Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Snapchat, that you're releasing content and the feedback comes in the form of likes, shares, regrams, replies, and so on. Sometimes you get really positive feedback. A lot of people are engaging with your product or whatever you send out, and a lot of times you don't get positive feedback. What that does is it makes those social media engines very, very addictive. You want to keep going back, you want to keep sending out new content to see if this happens to be the one gold nugget that's going to get lots of positive feedback. So a couple of years ago, Reddit, the content platform, released what they called the button. And the button was just a button that you could press only once if you were a member of the Reddit site, and you had no idea what the button was going to do. It was sort of this weird social experiment. And what happened was when you pushed the button, there was a countdown clock. And the countdown clock started at 60 seconds and it counted down until someone pushed the button, and when they did, it went back up to 60. Now, if you waited for the clock to get down to say 59 or 58 or 57 seconds, you got a particular color of badge that suggested that you were impatient. You couldn't wait for the clock to tick down further. Over time though, because people had already pushed the button and they couldn't push it again, it started to tick down further into the 40s, into the 30s, and so people would get a different colored badge that suggested that they'd waited, that they'd been patient. Now, people had no idea what this button did. There was some uncertainty about it, which made it really, really compelling. They kept returning, wondering whether the person who pushed the button last when it would tick down to 0 would get some special award, maybe a prize from the Reddit founders. They weren't really sure what would happen. What ended up happening was about a month and a half after this happened, the last person pushed the button, it counted down to 0, and that was it. There was really no major feedback, but it was the uncertainty of the whole process that got people really involved. No one had any idea what the outcome would be, but they were all glued to this platform for 6 weeks because the uncertainty was so great. If you know that you're going to do something and it's going to give you a particular form of feedback, you will stop doing that pretty soon. We know this from pigeons, for example. There's classic work on pigeons. If you put pigeons in front of a light, and when the light turns red, they can peck the light, and you give them food. If you give them food every time they do that, they will eat, but they'll eventually stop. They'll peck, they'll stop, they'll eat. But if you make it uncertain, so they peck sometimes, they don't actually get food, they will peck much longer just because of the pleasure they get from the uncertainty and from not knowing whether they're going to get the food. Sometimes they actually end up massively overeating because they're pecking just to see whether they get the food in the first place. So if you can do the same thing with any content you release, you'll find the same thing, that people like those pigeons will pay much more attention for much longer.